Luke Taylor to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered government support for Thames Water. Okay. Thank you very much, Miss Law. Again, a pleasure to serve to your chairship. I'd also like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting me this important and extremely topical debate. And I also thank members from across the House for joining this afternoon. I hope we are all of the same opinion on the problem, although we might well differ slightly on the solution. 16 million Britons are gaslit daily by Thames Water. The company has unleashed filth in our waterways and homes whilst cutting deeper and deeper into personal finances. When I think about the performance of Thames Water, I imagine the very excrement it fails to manage. And despite all of this, years of historic underinvestment in favour of profit has run the business into the ground. It now finds itself on the brink of collapse, counting down its days of cash remaining, as we all watched in the recent documentaries. It makes an absolute mockery of the water utility industry that fat cat shareholders are enjoying obscene payouts and company executives raking sky-high salaries and bonuses, all whilst our rivers and our wallets suffer. River ecosystems are dying, and our children are denied the joy of swimming in nature due to the threat of swallowing human waste. Absolutely.
I thank the honourable member for allowing me to intervene and indeed congratulate him on securing this important debate on Thames Water. With Thames Water, as he has just noted, it is beyond clear from my Slough constituents that they are not happy. In fact, recent figures have demonstrated that they were one of the worst scoring for customer satisfaction for the 4th year in a row. And we all know that the last Conservative government has had a rotten record on water companies, laden with debt, ridiculous executive bonuses and sky-high bills. That is not a sustainable future. Does the honourable member agree that the government must ensure that our customers and our environment are at the heart of future reforms and regulation in the sector?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I completely agree that customers and our residents, our constituents, must be put at the heart of any solution. We must find a way to ensure that people do not have to go through this experience anymore. As he says so correctly, absolutely awful customer satisfaction ratings, which alone is incredible excuse for us to be here to raise their concerns in this place. And going beautifully on to the script, just this Tuesday, Thames Water customers were slammed with a 31% hike in their bills in the middle of a cost of living crisis to pay for this utterly appalling service. I say customers lightly, as those unlucky enough to call Thames Water our provider are more like prisoners. I say that because choice in this market is an illusion. In this country, taxpayers cannot choose their water utility company. They are trapped. This afternoon, I want to make the argument that the only way this government can support Thames Water is by saving itself from itself.
On that point,
absolutely.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for securing this debate and for giving way. My constituents in Bicester and Woodstock are fed up of Thames Water providing a poor service and yet continually hiking the charges for it. Constituents like Martin, who lives in Blaydon, whose toilet floods regularly due to a collapsed sewer and now has a tanker parked outside his house 24/7 because Thames Water is so delayed in making the repairs. So would my honourable friend agree with me that we need a reset at Thames Water after years of financial and operational failure? And would he further agree with me that the government is quite wrong to be resisting special administration, which would be the best way to ensure that the financial mismanagement of the past sits rightly with the vulture funds and bondholders and not with future bill payers?
I thank my honourable friend from Bicester and Woodstock for his intervention. He's absolutely right that the burden must lay on the vulture funds, and his comments and his words are as wise as the residents of his Bicester and Woodstock constituency. We Liberal Democrats have long called for action to reform this lousy company. It has been clear to us for a very long time that its current position is untenable. Recognising that it is fundamentally broken, we have no fear in saying exactly what we need: to rip it up and restructure it so that it can finally work for our constituents. To set out my argument, I will begin by touching upon the sheer mess the company is in. Many of the points I will make will naturally come as no shock to members across this House whose residents are flooding their inbox as Thames Water flood our rivers with sewage. I will then outline why the government must, with utmost urgency, put the failing water company into special administration. Finally, I plan to argue that the only way this government can support Thames Water is by scrapping Ofwat and finally getting a regulator that uses its teeth. Thames Water is knee-deep in a nightmare of its own making. In 2024, they set a new record, pumping 50% more untreated sewage into our waterways. 2023 saw the company be named as the worst performer in England, completely failing to meet its own performance metrics. And in 2022, it made an extra £500 million in profit, despite pipe bursts during a heatwave that caused regional drought and a hosepipe ban. Untreated sewage now pumps through waterways in southern England like it is part of the furniture. I fear that were it not for the new Thames Tideway Tunnel, which I was fortunate enough to visit recently, our river would be destined for the unmanageable decline that turns waterways into open sewers like something straight out of a Dickens novel. Humans can choose not to go in the water. Flora and fauna have no such luxury. We're advised to not let our dogs swim in the river because they may die from the pollution. Red chalk stream habitats are being decimated from floods of untreated waste. These precious ecosystems are dying. They have no choice but to endure the toxic chemicals from Thames Water's outflow pipes. Thames' sewage problems stem from a systemic failure to update its outdated, mostly Victorian infrastructure. High-risk infrastructure is left to ad hoc fixes with zero communication to customers. The company's approach to fixing water facilities in Southwark in London is a prime example of this reckless approach. Last year, their chief executive had the audacity to blame excess storm overflows on climate change. Yes, climate change is real. Yes, it's causing more intense rainfall and more regular storms. But let me ask them, how long have we known about this? Why did Thames not invest annually in their crumbling infrastructure to handle this well-known challenge? Instead of prioritising the environment and local communities, Thames Water chose to line the pockets of its executives, shareholders and vulture funds that owned it. In 2023, it paid £196 million in dividends. And over the last 4 years, £62 million has been paid out to company executives in bonuses. This is at a time when the company is drowning in debt, a debt currently standing at a whopping £19 billion. And startlingly, over 25% of customer water bills are spent on paying interest on the company's debt. That is our money paying for their mistakes. And now we're being told not to worry, that it's all in hand, because KKR, a US private equity group, has been selected as the preferred bidder to take control of Thames. This is not a British company. It has no stake in British communities. We have no reason to believe that a private equity group based in the United States will act as though it has any obligation other than to itself. Northumbrian Water, which KKR has a significant stake in, was responsible for over 40,000 sewage spills in 2024. What will change if it takes over Thames? Enough is enough. The government must step up. Absolutely.
I thank the honourable member, and he's making a very, very hard-hitting speech. The water bill rises, which he referred to earlier, the scale of those has left many of my more vulnerable Slough constituents very, very anxious about how they will end up paying those bills. Because while customers struggle, as he has rightly pointed out, we know that over recent years, water companies like Thames Water have pumped record levels of sewage into our rivers, paid millions into bonuses for bosses, and failed to invest adequately in vital infrastructure. Does the honourable member agree that the government must take firm steps to stop this exploitation of the environment and of our people, and that water companies like Thames Water must now step up to the plate to protect the most vulnerable customers?
I absolutely agree. I mean, my only fear is the the lack of Thames Water's ability to do that, simply due to the debt pile, simply due to the situation the company finds itself. But his words on behalf of his vulnerable residents are clearly come from a very deep wish of service for them. Now, the government must step up, and it must not support Thames Water, as the somewhat misleading title of this debate would imply. First, but it must support customers throughout the South by finally doing what has long been necessary. Indeed, the first draft of the debate titled to the Backbench Business Committee was 10 Things I Hate About Thames Water. And my researcher will appreciate me getting that in there. But alas, we were not able to bring that forward. The government must place Thames Water under special administration. And I don't lay all of the blame at the feet of this government. We all know that for far too long the last Conservative government stood idly by whilst Thames Water poisoned our waterways. But with each passing day, the government must surely recognise the growing urgency of taking action, or else it will be their fault. Under special administration, the state can temporarily take control of this collapsing company. The day-to-day operations would carry on as normal, but the board that has bled the business dry would be gone, restructured, replaced. The greedy executives who have pocketed millions in bonuses while running the company into the ground would be stripped of their bonuses. There can be no more fat paychecks whilst they fail customers. The taxpayer would no longer be forced to watch helplessly as their bills rise like the water level, slowly drowning them just to cover the company's massive and foolish debt. With new leadership, there is a chance for a new direction. Special administration could see the company finally implement a meaningful plan to tackle the sewage crisis that has plagued our waterways for far too long. No longer would our streams, rivers and lakes be seen as expendable. The £3 billion debt lifeline Thames has just secured will not last forever, and all it serves to do is preserve a broken status quo. The company has proven time and time again it is not fit for purpose. If this government does not act now, how much more of our constituents' money will be flushed down the drain? Now, I'm begging the government, literally begging, for them to listen to our anger and save us from Thames Water's incompetence, and take steps to ensure that the next iteration of Thames Water and existing other companies across the UK cannot get away with this kind of behaviour again. That starts with a proper water company regulator that actually does its job. Ofwat is an utter disgrace. It is asleep at the wheel and complicit in the chaos caused by the company. The regulator has sleepwalked through the mess that is Thames Water, now greenlighting a 35% hike in bills over the next 5 years. It has turned a blind eye to the outrageous profits pocketed by Thames bonuses and shareholders. It has sat leisurely by as the water company has refused to properly update their crumbling infrastructure, and repeatedly refused to set meaningful environmental targets for water companies to improve the quality of our water. The regulator is, through its inaction, helping Thames Water fleece the taxpayer and carry out its dirty work. It is time to scrap it. Ofwat must be replaced by a new regulator, one with real teeth, one that, in the great tradition of antitrust and community-first capitalism, isn't afraid of a fight. It isn't afraid to square up firmly to those who benefit most from a broken system. It isn't afraid to be bold and ambitious in fighting for the best of the British people, and we expect nothing less from the government. So why should we shrink from demanding that from the regulatory arms of the state? Indeed, if the government holds itself to that standard, why should it hold its agencies to anything less? The fact of the matter is that our constituents are being utterly let down. We cannot go on like this. Across the board, the water industry needs wholesale reform. But right at the heart of the scandal, there, wallowing in a stinking mess of its own making, is Thames Water. A company that was set up to serve the public, but which has instead become a paragon of failure, debt and daylight robbery. The government does not have long. It must act swiftly to rescue the idea at the heart of the company, an idea, I hope, that has not been fully eroded or caked in sludge, that a utility company working in collaboration with government can be a force for good governance. I will.
I'm very, very grateful, and I'm sure the honourable member is wondering why a Scottish MP is about to speak in a debate about Thames Water. But what I'm concerned about is, I agree with his concerns about Thames Water, absolutely, but the model he seems to be suggesting is very close to what we have in Scotland with Scottish Water, which I'm sure he's done a lot of research on, and he will know that sewage dumped into Scotland's rivers and lochs happen more than 600 hours a day. 600 hours a day in 2023, and we do not monitor our water discharges anywhere near like what happens in England. So I'm urging caution. What the model you are proposing does not work in Scotland. SEPA, the environmental agency, the regulator, does not carry out the powers, or despite having the powers, in the way that he might want. So caution is what I'm urging.
I genuinely thank the honourable member for his contribution, and I think it does highlight that there is no silver bullet. I think that the solutions that we propose are complex, they are difficult, and they require that sort of monitoring, that sort of oversight of infrastructure plans, of properly phased and long-term planning investment in infrastructure to avoid the inevitable discharges that we see under the current system. Upgrading the holding tanks, for example, upgrading the technologies that do the filtration and the cleaning of the water before it is then the effluent is then put back into the river. Only through that proper process can we see improvement. His challenge is fair and welcome. It is not a silver bullet. I will move to conclusion. A utility company working in collaboration with government must be a force for good governance. It can be a force for good management of our environment and good value to bill payers too. Imagine it. Imagine looking at your water bill and thinking this is good value. I promise you, there is a future like that. And that is what is at stake. This government must act now to sort out this mess and establish that in this country, utility companies must only thrive when they take their responsibilities to the environment and their responsibilities to us, not only the pursuit of profit. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered government support for Thames Water. Belle Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Ms Low, and it's a pleasure to see you in the chair. I'd like to start by thanking the member for Sutton and Sheen for securing his debate and for not supporting Thames Water. Very pleased to hear that. I don't think anyone is deluded into thinking that Thames Water are doing a good job, certainly not me and certainly not my constituents. Since I've been elected to this House, hardly a year has passed without a major water infrastructure issue, which has left hundreds of my constituents without water for days on end. And that's not to mention the years of my life in my constituency where I've been a victim of Thames Water, extremely shoddy service myself. Other than 3 years in Yorkshire, I have had to endure Thames Water for that in the entirety of that time. And Thames Water has actually shown very little concern for the impact that this has had. In 2023, a burst water pipe on Brixton Hill left residents without water for 3 days. Last July, on one of the hottest days of the year, residents of Clarence Avenue had their water shut off without any prior notice. And as recently as December, faulty valve pumps in Brixton left homes without water for longer than 4 days. Now, these are just the most recent incidences. As I've said, since I began in this House, there have been a number of them. And I know it's not just residents of Clapham and Brixton Hill who would have experienced these disruptions in service, so you can imagine my constituents' outrage when, in wake of their poor service and increased bills, they see Thames Water shareholders and directors receive millions of pounds in dividends. In October 2023, Thames Water made interim dividend payments totalling £37.5 million to its holding company, Thames Water Utilities Limited, whilst the pipes are literally rotting under our feet. And in March 2024, the company made further dividend payments amounting to £158.3 million, from which they received non-cash benefits, and that's whilst the quality of water continues to decline every single year. The Thames Water chairman, Sir Adrian Montague, was accused of conflict of interest over the 37 million dividend payment to shareholders in February this year. Under his tenure, Thames Water paid £195.8 million in dividends, breaching Ofwat rules, who fined them just £18 million. But Thames Water paid £0 of this £18 million fine. And I agree with the honourable member when he opened the debate that, Ofwat is also not fit for purpose. And I also, for those who maybe have a better understanding of how such things work, do not understand how a company in debt and a company that is failing and a company whose infrastructure is damaged has the money to pay dividends to its shareholders. While my constituents' taps run dry, the fat cats of Thames Water are literally being able to turn on theirs. But of course, this is not to drink the water because they know better. And the cherry on the sewage-filled cake, on Tuesday, my constituents and millions of Thames Water customers woke up to what would have been the world's worst April Fool's Day joke, but instead it was a grim reality of a 31% bill increase. One constituent recently wrote to me because they're experiencing a 45.8% monthly increase on their bill. It will be rising from £36.55 to £53.30 a month. The service will remain shoddy, but the price they're made to pay will rise. And Thames Water are rinsing my constituents, pouring sewage into our waterways, siphoning off money to shareholders and hiking up bills to pay for it. And it's fair to say that Thames Water's management is comparable to what they're dumping in the Thames crap. It's just crap. They are running the company's finances into the ground and relying on the government to bail them out, all the while leaving my constituents in the vulnerable position of having no running water at times. And if they're relying on the government to bail them out, as taxpayers, we are literally paying them twice. They clearly cannot be trusted to legitimately operate such a vital service, and they certainly shouldn't be allowed to pocket thousands of pounds in the process. So I do believe that the government should be supporting Thames Water, but in fact, I think that the government should be fully supporting Thames Water back into public ownership. That is the only support they should be giving them. Rather than allowing a US private equity firm to take it over, it should be taken over by the government and made accountable to its service users, the British public. Those who are against nationalisation on an ideological basis will say that competition is needed to ensure innovation and the best service. But as you've heard already, there is no competition for Thames Water. Which other water company can my constituents switch to when the service is poor? It makes no sense to me that a new private company should be allowed to take over and reap the profits with little incentive to provide a better service. My constituents deserve a better service than what they're currently receiving. I do not believe that the continued private ownership of Thames Water will bring that. Public ownership is not going to solve every single issue with Thames Water, but it will certainly solve more than allowing an American company to take it over and profit off the backs of my constituents. Thank you.
Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Ms Lewell. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Sutton and Cheam, for securing this debate and for his very stirring opening remarks. While the government has repeatedly referenced the £22 billion black hole which they inherited, there's been far less reference to the debt accrued by Thames Water, which is comparable to this figure. Executives from the company have received hefty bonuses and shareholders have taken billions of pounds in dividends out of the company, but it is Thames Water's customers who are seeing their bills rise by an average of 35% over the next 5 years. During a cost of living crisis on top of other mounting bills, this rise is extremely concerning for many of my constituents. And what is even more alarming is that Thames Water do not believe the bill hike is sufficient to meet the target set by Ofwat, and they have since referred the final determination to the Competition and Markets Authority. The Liberal Democrats have been calling for Thames Water to be placed into special administration, as the water company has shown that it cannot be trusted to provide a service which does not degrade our environment or line the pockets of their shareholders. However, in response to these calls, the government has implied that Thames Water are not breaching their statutory duties and therefore intervention is not under immediate consideration. However, Thames Water have repeatedly shown an inability to undertake their basic duties. In my constituency of Richmond Park, residents of Kingston Vale have had to endure almost constant traffic chaos in their neighbourhood as Thames Water have repeatedly had to attend to a burst sewage pipe, One of my constituents has reported to my office that sewage spills over the road following a leak. And while Thames Water have recently agreed to replace the pipe, the company have resisted this for years. And I'm sure that the government would agree that people should not have to put up with unfiltered sludge spilling onto their pavements. By their own admission, senior managers of Thames Water acknowledge that many of their departments are understaffed, while they do not have the funds to invest in critical infrastructure to prevent leaks and sewage dumping into our rivers. In a recent BBC documentary, some of the staff members even admitted to presenting favourable statistics when measuring the concentration of E. coli in the Thames. The cleanliness of our rivers should not be an exercise in PR. It's extremely important that Thames Water are held to account for polluting our rivers. In 2024, Thames Water were responsible for 298,081 hours worth of sewage spills. Following a Freedom of Information request submitted by the Liberal Democrats, it has been discovered not a penny of fines has been collected by Ofwat for this disregard of our environment. By not replacing Ofwat with a regulator with some teeth, the government is not installing a sufficient deterrent to ensure that Thames Water takes action to prevent these environmental incidents. With the financial situation that Thames Water is currently in and their current operational capacity, as well as recent reports that KKR, which boasts a similarly poor environmental record with Northumbrian Water, plan to buy the company, can I ask the Minister whether she believes that Thames Water have the capabilities to prevent serious environmental hazards from repeatedly occurring? Thank you, Chair.
Will Stone.
I thank the honourable member from Sutton and Shem for bringing forward this debate. I'm a little bit surprised it was only 10 things he hates about Thames Water. My list is significantly higher. But it is a really important debate. And I wanted to come into it with a balanced view and not just come in here and slate Thames Water, but it's incredibly hard. I feel that they are systematically failing the public on pretty much every level. We've seen a lack of investment in infrastructure, which has resulted in mass pollution, the needless death of thousands of animals and fish, and just destruction to our natural habitat, which is completely unacceptable. And at the same time, where they've not been investing, they've been paying out astronomical fees to their CEOs, their shareholders in dividends. It is completely ridiculous, and they are passing that on to my residents, and this is something that we really need to look at changing. And if we flip the page to other things that they are failing on, looking at their customer service, they were attempting to charge a resident in Swindon North over £11,000. They were saying weekly he was using an Olympic-sized swimming pool of water. He battled with them for over a year, getting nowhere. It took one email from me to get Thames Water to come out and look at it. Shock, horror, he wasn't using an Olympic-sized swimming pool. They were actually owed him money. So they changed that. But it shouldn't take a Member of Parliament emailing to intervene. That is completely wrong, and it is completely unacceptable. They need to be more accountable to the public. And then we also have in Swindon flooding. Like every constituency, we have flooding from Priory Vale to Stratton St Margaret, where Thames Water have agreed that they are at fault. They say it's their problem, and yet they do nothing about it. This is unacceptable. The residents can't remortgage their house. They can't move on. They are trapped in a situation where they have to accept the fact that every year their house is going to flood. Whilst once again, Thames Water make more profit. Completely a shoddy, completely unacceptable. We've also heard today about the increase in prices. I would urge Ofwat to reject Thames Water's new claim of increasing the prices more, because, as we said, they are not delivering, they are not accountable. So what metric are they actually succeeding on? It is unacceptable. I'm sure everybody in this room would say they should not be increasing it more. I am pleased to see that the government are planning to introduce more regulations from monitoring the sewage systems more and give Ofwat more power. I just want to see them use it. So thank you once again for the member from Sutton and Shem. I thought the debate was going to be a bit busier, so I didn't plan a long speech. But it is vitally important, and I look forward to hearing what the Minister has to say on the matter. Thank you.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Ms Law. It's an absolute pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. And can I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Sutton and Cheam, for securing this really important debate. A debate being held only a short time after we found out that Thames Water pumped an incredible 298,081 hours worth of sewage into our waterways in 2024, attacking our natural environment, undermining public trust, and all at the same time as continuing to pay out significant bonuses to their bosses and dividends to their shareholders, whilst demanding taxpayers foot the bill. Quite frankly, Ms Lowell, it beggars belief. Now, the slew of scandals, a lack of trust, and concerns about water quality, not to mention the parlous state of the Thames Water's finances that my honourable friend has so eloquently outlined, are exactly why I and local campaigners are fighting Thames Water's controversial proposals to pump treated sewage into the river at Teddington in my constituency. And the government has the power to take this scheme off the table, as both the Shadow Minister knows from when my honourable friend, the member for Richmond Park, and I lobbied him before the last election, and the new Minister also has the power to take this scheme off the table. And I'm going to outline why this scheme shouldn't go ahead, and it does also link into the state of Thames Water's finances. The river is at the very heart of the community in my constituency, with paddle boarders, rowers, wild water swimmers, all sorts, not just in our local community, but from further afield coming to use the river. And residents are extremely worried about the environmental impact of these proposals, including on human health, biodiversity, wildlife, and of course water quality.
My honourable friend give way.
Very happy to give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and just to highlight that my constituents in Ham and North Kingston, on the opposite bank of the river from hers in Twickenham, are particularly concerned about how the construction impacts are going to affect the Hamlands Nature Reserve, and we haven't heard enough from Thames Water about exactly what their plans are for that. Would she agree with me that Thames Water need to be much more upfront about what exactly it is they're planning to do?
Minnie Wilson.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of those environmental as well as social impacts have yet to be really set out in detail. She and I are both eagerly awaiting, as are thousands of our constituents, the environmental impact assessments and the statutory consultation, which I believe will be starting later this year. Now, Thames Water keep telling us that water quality will not be compromised, yet they failed to assure us that dangerous compounds and chemicals, including PFAS, so-called forever chemicals, which I've talked at length to the Minister about, will be filtered out. Their environmental track record tells a different story, and residents are understandably sceptical. Thames Water insists the proposals represent the best value option, yet they have failed to show to the community and elected representatives their workings on how they've got to this best value definition. The company has a proven history of failing to invest in infrastructure and in the essentials, whilst pouring millions of pounds of bill payers' money into short-term fixes that do nothing but produce new assets for the company to borrow against. And indeed, that's what many residents are suspicious this scheme is about. It's about trying to load up their balance sheet to be able to leverage yet more debt. So just as Thames Water declare themselves to be on the verge of collapse, the government would approve a £300 million infrastructure project that, by the company's own admission, will only be used once every 2 years and save only 1/10 of the hundreds of millions of litres of water that Thames Water loses every day through leaks. And this is after Thames Water spent some £250 million on the Beckton desalination plant back in 2012, which was meant to improve water resilience in London, but has barely been used. And when I questioned Thames Water's CEO about this, he told me it didn't work as well as it was meant to. I kid you not. This leaves Thames Water customers in my constituency rightly asking why they should pay the price for Thames Water's mismanagement. And if the Teddington Direct River abstraction does get the green light from government, will it actually deliver the benefits that Thames Water claim it will to warrant the environmental impact, both on our river and indeed on the shores of our river? But it's the issue of trust here, Ms Lowell, that is so important to public confidence in our water companies and our water infrastructure. The public ought to have confidence that the companies responsible for our most basic human need, clean water, are acting in their best interests, not the interests of shareholders and executives. Yet time and again, Thames Water has eroded that trust and proven themselves unworthy of the public's confidence. And throughout, it has been our constituents that have been asked to pay up for the failures and the mismanagement of Thames Water. And over a quarter of bill payers' money is being spent simply servicing water company debt. Worse still, while Thames Water pleads poverty, its executives slip out the back door with eye-watering bonuses. Where is the accountability? Where is the justice for those who suffer the consequences of their negligence? And as my honourable friend has already set out, the Liberal Democrats have a strong record on this issue. And I want to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Witney and his attempts to hold Thames Water to account in the courts and challenge them for their horrendous behaviour. He's been absolutely outstanding, and I want to thank him for everything he's done with his tremendous campaign. We must put an end to this cycle of environmental negligence and financial mismanagement. Thames Water is on the brink, and placing it into special administration is the only way to prevent a full-scale collapse. Meanwhile, Ofwat lacks the authority to hold failing water companies to account, and unless the government takes decisive action, it risks the same weakness. It's time, as my honourable friend has already said, to replace Ofwat with a regulator that has real enforcement powers and the full backing of the government behind it. The bottom line is, Ms Lewell, that we need to be cracking down on failing water companies, not propping them up. And with customers paying ever higher bills and our precious environment at risk, the government must go much further, much faster in reining in these companies. Thank you.
Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Ms Lewell. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I'd like to add my thanks to the Honourable Member for Sutton Cheam for securing this important debate this afternoon. Like all of us here today, I've been contacted by dozens of constituents who've been affected by problems both in service and, of course, by the recent increase in their Thames Water bills. A family of 4 in my constituency have been in touch to say they've had an increase of almost £300 per year just for their water bill because of the recent increases. And that increase for working families is unsustainable and causes more financial instability for families across my Bexley-Heath and Crayford constituency. And alongside this increase, as we've heard, the service that's been provided to constituents continues to not be good enough and is affecting residents on a daily basis. Years of underinvestment in infrastructure, particularly due to the previous government's weak regulations, has created an unreliable system for which the public are now expected to foot the growing bill. And on Crayford High Street, in the second main town centre in my constituency, it's not unusual for the road to be closed for a month or two, has happened on several occasions in recent years due to water leaks, diverting hundreds of residents who use that road for the school pickup, for commuting to work, visiting the shops in the town centre and getting on with their lives. And many constituents, whilst finding the closure of the road an inconvenience, they wouldn't agree. They would, of course, support the occasional closure if it would improve services, but the problems continue. And I've seen in my 20 years as a local councillor, locally until last year, the situation get worse as that infrastructure got worse year on year. And those leaks that we see due to poorly maintained infrastructure are common across roads in each part of my constituency, in Barnhurst, in Bexley-Heath, in Crayford, in Northumberland Heath and Slade Green. And we, as a result, do see those constant road closures and great inconvenience to our residents across the constituency. I was pleased to support the government's Water Special Measures Act, which became law earlier this year, but I know that the announcement of an independent commissioner into the water sector and its regulation will be welcomed by many constituents across Bexley and Crayford. However, I do look forward today to, after the stories we've heard, to hearing the Minister's feedback on what further action can be taken to ensure Thames Water deliver valuable upgrades to both their infrastructure and their work to stabilise prices, which continue to cause great concern for my constituents across Bexley and Crayford. Thank you, Ms Lewell.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Ms Lewell. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I thank my honourable friend for Sutton and Cheam for securing this debate on government support for Thames Water. So what does government support for Thames Water look like? Our government, our current government, supports Thames Water by letting it breach the terms of its operating licence, by letting Ofwat ignore its own rules, by letting consumers take the pain of higher bills for no gain, letting financiers make out like bandits, and letting our rivers continue to be filled with sewage. What's shocking about this is it's a Labour government doing this. This government is turning out to be every bit as bad as the Conservatives were when it comes to protecting our rivers, and is completely ducking its responsibilities. It is within your powers as the Minister to take action. The Minister is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Water and Flooding, for DEFRA. DEFRA oversees Ofwat. Ofwat issues operating licences to water companies. Here are some of the key requirements that Thames Water needs to comply with per its Ofwat-issued operating licence. Number 1, operational requirement to comply with environmental and health standards. Thames Water is failing this requirement. As per the EA's data, and as my honourable friend has already said, in 2024, Thames Water discharged nearly 300,000 hours of sewage. That's 50% up on 2023. It's illegal to dump sewage in dry conditions, but this is repeatedly happening. Professor Peter Hammond, who lives in my constituency, monitored the Stanton Harcourt sewage treatment works in my constituency and found there have been 266 illegal spills in just a single sewage treatment works in a 4-year period. That's operating requirement, complete failure. Second one, financial viability requirement. Thames Water is failing this requirement because it has to have 2 licences of investment grade credit ratings. Currently, it has no credit ratings that are investment grade. Standard & Poor's has the company's debt 12 notches below investment grade, and Moody's has it 9 notches below. That's as far deep into junk bond territory as you can get. This is because Thames Water now has 19 billion of debt and only 1.2 billion of cash flows in the last financial year to March 2024. 19 billion of debt, 1.2 billion of cash in. That is not sensible. It's not a sensible way to run a company. Everybody knows that. By allowing Thames Water to breach this rule, you introduce moral hazard into the entire sector, the water sector and also all other regulated sectors. Other water companies take note that there has been no material sanction of Thames Water and realise they can also likely get away with it. Of the nearly 1.4 billion of funding due to come into the company, 900 million of that is going straight out against in interest expenses, sweet financial goodies for hedge funds, and advisory fees. This is not fair on our bill payers. Customers are being royally stuffed, and Ofwat and your DEFRA team are standing by. Third, fair pricing requirements. There's a requirement to demonstrate fairness, transparency and affordability to customers, and Thames Water is failing in this one too. Bills have gone up, as many people have already said, by a headline of 31%. Many Witney constituents have written to me with increases of 50, 70 or even one at 93% increases. Thames Water has an application on top of this to add insult into injury into the CMA to increase bills even higher by 59%. Okay, fourth, ownership requirements. This one really gets my goat. Thames Water must inform Ofwat of any change to control. Ultimate controllers are defined in Ofwat's papers as a position of control or a position to materially influence the company. Thames Water's own advisors have publicly stated that the company, let's say it again. Thames Water's own advisors have publicly stated that the company is de facto controlled by its creditors. Ofwat is ignoring this. Ofwat extraordinarily, and this is in the last month, has written to me saying that despite it being publicly stated in the press that OMERS, which is one of its shareholders, has written its stake down to 0, has pulled its board representation off last May, is still actually controlling the company. Now, why is this going on? What could be going on here? It smells that...
It smells like...
Yes, it does. Because I think Ofwat is doing exactly what the company's creditors want them to do. And I'm wondering why that is happening. Because it shouldn't be. Finally, a failure to innovate. There's a host of technologies out there, and far too often we hear the same old lines about Victorian sewers, cameras, and how impossible it all is. There's a huge range of leak detection, pipeline monitoring, protective maintenance, trenchless pipe repair, pressure management technologies. I hear from Oxfordshire firms it's easier to sell sewer technology solutions into the US and into Europe than it is into the UK. Something is going seriously wrong. We could start by looking at whether incentives are effectively aligned. I don't believe they are. So what are the consequences of this failure to act? You can lay a lot of the blame at the last government. That's fine. It's easy. But what we've got so far is we've had a Water Special Measures Act, which was more window dressing than action. I'm new to Parliament, and I was particularly dismayed that not a single word of a single proposed amendment from any party was accepted by you. Oh, sorry, by the Minister. Apologies. I wish in Parliament we all had enough confidence to accept good ideas where we find them. I live in hope. Certainly.
Thank you very much. Just to say, on that point, it's incorrect. Actually, amendments were discussed in the other place, across party, and a compromise amendment was agreed and reached on a few different occasions. So I just want to push gently back on that amendments in the other place, where it started, where the bill began, were actually discussed cross-party and put forward. So it's factually incorrect to say that no amendments were taken when that isn't actually true.
Charlie Maynard.
Thank you. No amendments in the Commons, all 60 of them or whatever they were. Some of the rejections included putting flow meters on the outflows of sewage treatment works, sort of logical, establishing targets to reduce pollution over time using existing benchmarks of hours or spilled sewage, making capacity of sewage treatment works calculations more transparent, bringing environmental experts and consumer representatives onto water boards. So this Labour government is now allowing a public utility company to line the pockets of bankers and hedge funds at the expense of bill payers. As someone said in the FT's notes this week, with water, it's a total monopoly and a total shambles. It's a shambopoly, if you will. This government's support for Thames Water essentially amounts to unconditional support for the company's creditors at a direct and massive costs to its customers. So what do we need instead? First, we need to put the company out of its financial misery and to put it into special administration. Allow debt to be massively written down to something like 3 times cash flows or thereabouts. And by reducing that debt, the company will have a balance sheet which is sufficiently strong to allow it to invest in the infrastructure we so desperately need. And our bill payments will now start being spent on treatment and fixing treatment works and pipe networks rather than paying interest. We allow for water companies coming out of special administration to be mutually owned by their customers and professionally managed. And we set pollution baselines and pollution reduction targets, and we get serious about putting transparency, targets and technology to work to clean up our rivers. I believe the government is shying away from special administration option, which is clearly the most logical thing at this point, either because of threats of legal action against it, or phantasmagorical scenarios of financial Armageddon, or both. Do not let, please, Thames Water's lobbyists, including Ruth Kelly, ex-Labour Minister who is now chair of Water UK, scaremonger you out of taking action which 16 million consumers of your electorate need you to do. These scenarios are patently not true, and the best person to ask here is Thames Water. As per page 92 of Thames Water's advisor's own independent expert report, Teneo, they estimate that the net cost to the Treasury of taking the company into special administration, even in the worst case scenario, is 0. Page 92, please look it up. So instead, that we now have this bizarre situation where a Labour government is cheerleading American hedge funds and private equity funds to take over our largest water company and make a massive profit out of its customers. What goes for Thames Water will very likely go for the rest of the sector. So the signal you and your government is sending the sector and other... Sorry, I said...
Don't wish to spoil the member's floor, but the conventions apply the same in Westminster Hall as they do in the main chamber. We do not use the word you or your in this chamber. Unless you're referring to myself.
Many apologies to the Chair and to the Minister. So the signal the Minister and the government is sending this sector and other regulated sectors is simply terrible. All the customers in my Witney constituency and across the whole catchment really want at this point is reliable, affordable, clean water to our homes. We need local rivers and lakes which aren't having sewage poured into them on a near daily basis. And we want a government who is serious about putting the interests of customers and our rivers before the interests of hedge funds and private equity funds. Please stop letting us down.
Person Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Mrs Lewell, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I begin by thanking the honourable member for Sutton and Cheam for bringing forward this really important debate. And it's good to listen to all of the contributions that have been made so far, because as we all know, water is vital and we are using it every single day. And that is why it is so deeply concerning that we have such great challenges in our water industry, and particularly those that have been highlighted with Thames Water. Under the last government, we uncovered the true extent of the issues with our water system, indeed which no political party or political administration had previously attempted to do, by increasing the monitoring of storm overflows. Because back in 2010, just 7% of storm overflows were monitored, and when we left office, 100% of those outlets were monitored, therefore giving the government, indeed our regulators, a proper, true understanding of the state in which those storm overflows were being utilised by our water companies. And that resulted... Yes, I will give way, yeah.
I'm grateful. And can I start just by paying tribute to him when he was a minister, all the work that he did in this area. He's highlighted the percentage of overflows that are now being monitored in England. I'm sure he's aware of some research that Suffers Against Sewage did, which confirmed 100% overflows in England were now being monitored. But in Scotland, the figure of overflows is only 4%. And does that not just show the huge difference there is between what's happening here in England, which is not ideal by any stretch, but in Scotland it's far, far worse?
Robbie Moore.
And I thank my honourable friend for his intervention there. And that is the point, because in order for any government to deal with the challenge, regardless of political colour and makeup, you absolutely need to understand the true extent of what you're dealing with. And it is frustrating that north of the border, only less than 5%, 4% of storm overflows are being monitored. So therefore, when any reference is given to what is happening with Scottish water, indeed north of the border in terms of what the devolved administration is doing with the Scottish Parliament in terms of tackling challenges with pollution north of the border, when there is no reference point, how can any proper strategy be put in place? And that's where it is important to get the level of monitoring sufficiently undertaken at the 100% level that we now have, because that resulted in us, under the last administration, being able to utilise and roll out the plan for water, which was more about stronger regulation, tougher enforcement and more investment. And coming on to the point to do with investment, which was picked up by the honourable member for Sutton and Cheam, was and mentioned Thames Tideway, 25 kilometres of underground capacity that has now been increased from Acton to Abbey Mills, a £5 billion project of investment that has been put in. It is now fully operational, having opened in in February of this year. Indeed, I was lucky enough to visit it going down into it before it was opened. But the great thing about that project is it is now draining about 34 of the most polluting combined sewer overflows within the Thames area, and will help improve the quality of the water that flows through the Thames. So just casting back onto the points that have been mentioned by members in this debate, the honourable member for Sutton and Cheam rightly raised the concerns around water bills increasing, the lack of trust with Thames Water, and the worrying signs of the level of, or poor level of service that his constituents are facing. Indeed, the member for Twickenham also picked up on that and was quite right to raise the meeting that we had when I was lucky enough to be a minister in the department for a short period of time, not only with herself but the member for Richmond Park, about the challenges with the Teddington project. And therefore I would actually urge the Minister to take on those concerns, because I think the challenges when there is no environmental impact assessment that has been properly established, those concerns are rightly being raised, and I'd urge the Minister to continue to put that level of pressure on Thames Water, because it was a concern that I certainly had. The member for Clapham and Brixton quite rightly raised challenges to do with constituents on Clarence Avenue and in Brixton itself to do with water shortages as a result of Thames Water not carrying out its duty as sufficiently as it should do, and to the quality of the members' constituents' expectations of the water company, and raising concerns around the level of bill increases that are going up around approximately about 31% for some of her constituents. And the member for Richmond Park also mentioned the obligation of statutory duties that a water company is duly bound to meet, and therefore quite rightly raising the poor satisfaction that Thames Water are delivering. And the member for Swindon North quite rightly raised the challenges to do with flooding that his constituents are experiencing, and Thames Water's refusal to take responsibility for those happening. And finally, the member for Bexley Heath and Crayford also referenced challenges to do with bill increases that Thames Water have brought out, and rightly raised the challenges of poor service that his constituents are experiencing. Now, Thames Water is probably the most distressing example of where our water system has gone wrong. Bills are rising, that has quite rightly been referenced, by about 33% this year, and the unfortunate fact that the government has failed to take actions, serious actions, meaning that consumers are now paying that additional bill rate increase. And this is being put on them in addition to the additional pressures of the cost of living with council tax rises, etc. And quite rightly, there is huge frustration out there that Thames Water shareholders have simply wrung the business dry of its capital, failed to invest to expand and its supply, and failed to invest to clean up sewage spills. Indeed, reference has already been made to the exceptional poor level of service deliverability that Thames Water has been rolling out. And that is why, under the last administration, we took steps to quite rightly address some of these challenges, not only faced by constituents and residents living within the Thames Water area, but across England. We blocked bonuses for water company executives. We rolled out dividends having to be specifically linked to environmental performance. We removed the cap of civil fines from a previous cap of £250,000 to an unlimited amount. More power being awarded to Ofwat to be able to levy on water companies in these circumstances. Indeed, in August last year, Thames Water were fined £104 million for its failure to avoid sewage overflows, and in other instances, Thames Water has been. Yes, I will give it. In other instances, Thames Water has put under a cash lock-up, preventing any dividends from being paid out by Thames Water without Ofwat's approval. And I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Can he be clear on how much of the fines that he's listed that Thames Water actually paid, and how they are allowed to pay out all of these dividends, given a number of the measures that he's stated, how they were allowed to in previous years? Because I genuinely cannot understand how that was allowed to continue for so long.
Well, this nicely comes on to the next point that I wanted to raise, which is the strength of the regulator. So Ofwat has the powers to link dividends to environmental performance, a measure that was put in place and a gift that was awarded to Ofwat to be able to utilise, indeed to ban bonuses for executives. But those powers are there should Ofwat wish to utilise them, and therefore I would like to urge the Minister and ask the Minister what is the Minister doing to ensure that Ofwat, as the regulator, is not only utilising the powers that have been awarded to it, but making sure that they are being robust in their actions as the regulator. As indeed many members have made concerns that Ofwat, quite rightly, have not been robust enough. Much has been said in this debate about nationalising our water industry, particularly Thames Water, but it is false to assume that a struggling private company will cease to be struggling purely because its owners change hands. Indebtedness does not go away because the company is nationalised, not without a taxpayer-funded bailout, something that would cost and force the failures of Thames Water executives into the pockets of working people. And I bring back the example that has been given with Scottish Water north of the border. There have been clearly a myriad of mistakes at Thames Water, but it is the responsibility of the independent regulator, Ofwat, to right these wrongs and utilise the powers that have been awarded to it as the regulator. I will, yes.
So I have to ask the honourable member why he is so against the idea of nationalising water, when I'm sure he agrees that the whole idea of privatisation is that there is some sort of competition, but there cannot be competition with water. Therefore, we cannot guarantee that they provide a good service, and we've seen that not just at the moment, but also under his government for a number of years. Does he understand why privatisation in this instance can't really work?
Well, I thank the honourable member for her intervention, but I simply take reference to the fact that since the water companies were nationalised, about £250 billion of private investment has been put into our water companies, not only to improve infrastructure, but to help with the service delivery rollout. That's £250 billion of money that would otherwise have to have come from the taxpayer. The second point that I'd like to make is that the system should work if the regulator is being robust enough. And the point being here that I've come back to is that there is a clear case potentially to argue that the regulator in Ofwat is not being utilising the powers sufficiently that have been awarded to it by the government, and therefore it is right that the government holds the regulator to account to be as robust as possible. And I also make reference to the point that even north of the border in Scotland, with Scottish Water, where only 4% of storm overflows are even being monitored, and the level of service delivery and service that Scottish residents are facing is, in some cases, is far, far worse than what we're experiencing by Thames Water. So simply by having a strategy of nationalisation does not demonstrate better rollout and service delivery for customers. So so as I was saying, there has been a myriad of mistakes at Thames Water, but it is the responsibility of the independent regulator, Ofwat, to right these wrongs. I will briefly.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that 250 billion number, where you get that from. Thank you.
So that I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and that's been a figure that has been referenced since nationalisation initially took place, and has been well recognised figure has been the amount of money that has been invested into our water companies by many of those in the private sector for the benefit of not only Thames Water but all of the water companies across England. The question that I would therefore like to put to the Minister is to ask what is she doing to ensure that Ofwat is utilising the powers that have been awarded to it, and does she have confidence in Ofwat in being able to exercise its function? If not, what is the Minister doing about it? And furthermore, the government needs to take action to further protect consumers from Thames Water fallout. The court settlement that Thames Water secured in February is designed to give everyone involved time to come to a sustainable plan. But I hope that the Minister will be able to reassure us today that her efforts are firmly in ensuring that their plan protects consumers. Finally, I would like to talk about the broader reforms and support that we can offer our water industry. Our water industry, as I and others have quite rightly said throughout this debate, is crying out for further investment. And I believe that we need to think further about how we can utilise the opportunities for the water sector across the country. So to that end, I'd like to ask the Minister, what considerations is she giving to providing more opportunities for individuals and organisations outside of major water companies to have influence on improving the water sector? And has she considered the untapped potential to increase water supply and its capacity to the thousands of people that are utilising water and the hundreds of landowners out there who, with the right incentives, the right financial incentives, indeed the right planning incentives, may wish to choose to further invest in the water industry, and that may be an avenue that the Minister may wish to explore. On that end, I'd like to once again thank the Honourable Member for Sutton and Sheen for securing this important debate.
Minister.
Thank you very much, and it is a real pleasure to see you in the chair, Madam Chair. And I'd like to wish you and everyone celebrating a very happy Easter for when it comes, and I hope that if you are celebrating, you have a very, very peaceful and enjoyable day. I'd like to also thank the Honourable Member for Sutton and Sheen for securing this debate and giving us space and time to discuss this really important issue. I hope I can use this as an opportunity to address some of the concerns currently being voiced around Thames Water and the water industry. And while I'm feeling rather positive, getting ready for Easter, instead of 10 things I hate about you, I rather instead if we could come up with 10 things that might give us reason for hope and renewal in the water industry. So to give give 10 reasons for hope. Since we've been elected, Madam Chair, we have 1, introduced the Water Special Measures Act to ban bonuses. 2, with the Water Special Measures Act, introduced criminal liability. 3, introduced automatic penalties. 4, set up the Independent Commission. 5, changed the Articles of Association. 6, ring-fenced money for investment. 7, doubled the compensation for after-burst pipes, which has come up through the Guaranteed Standard Scheme. 8, created customer panels for water companies. 9, done bathing water reforms. And 10, storm overflow guidance was published just last week. And it hasn't even been a year yet under this new Labour government. And also thinking about fairness and justice and various other points. I generally have an aversion to criticising people who are not able to be here and defend themselves. So I just want to reflect on the comment made about Ruth Kelly. She works for Water UK. She does not work for Thames Water. So I think to characterise her as being a defendant of Thames Water is maybe not entirely correct. Happy to, if you wish to retract.
Just to be clear, I said she was the chair of Water UK. So I did say exactly that.
Perhaps I misunderstood that he also, I think, said she was a defendant of or a spokesperson for Thames Water. Happy for you to retract again.
I said she was the chair of Water UK. Water UK is the trade body for water companies, so I think it follows.
Minister.
Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased. What I believe I've heard is that no reference was made to Ruth Kelly in regards to Thames Water. Instead, it was just solely about her representing, working for Water UK. But on that further point of people not here and able to defend themselves, I also just want to reflect as a trade unionist to talk about the people who work for some of these water companies. There are people out there who work for Thames Water who go out and they fix the broken pipes, they clean up the sewage, they deal with the sewage overspills. And the reports I've had from some of the unions, Madam Chair, is that they often face abuse for doing so. They're often at the forefront of people feeling angry with the company. And what I would like to say, and I hope on this point we have unity here, they are not responsible. Those people going out and cleaning up the mess, dealing with the difficulties, are not responsible. They are not Thames Water. They are people who work for it. And I would like to give them my thanks for the work they do in incredibly difficult circumstances.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for giving way, and on that I think we would all agree. And it was quite interesting watching the BBC documentary, seeing the people who work at Thames Water clearly wanted to do a good job. They wanted to improve things for their residents, their neighbours, their family and their friends. They just didn't have the chance to do so because of the structure of the company, because of the difficulties that it finds itself. And I think that is, we are having this discussion here today in this place about the need to help not only the customers, our residents, but also the workers who want to be doing so much better and find it so dispiriting that they are part of this failing organisation.
Minister.
Yeah, and I completely agree. They are there trying to do a good job, and I'd like to also say that it is a good industry to work in. People have long careers in it, an excellent trade union representation as well, may I add. So I'm not sure I'll have complete support on that point from everybody in the room. When I was doing so well, Madam Chair, but I just want to, as I say, echo it is not their responsibility. My honourable friend, the member for Slough, who's not now in his place, was right to say that customers in the environment should be at the heart of reforms. And as I mentioned, one of the things we did was change the Articles of Association to put customers onto the boards. But in the typical way in which he is always incredibly caring about his residents, I just wanted to mention to him and to everybody that we are holding the water companies to account to end water poverty by 2030. And we're currently consulting, or well, just about to consult, because we had to wait for PERDA, just about to consult on changing the rules around Watershore to extend the eligibility for it. And so for my honourable friend, the member for Clackham and Brixton Hill, I'm pleased that she enjoyed her 3 years in Yorkshire. It is a fine and wonderful, wonderful part of the country, and she's always welcome to come back. And she is an incredible champion for her community. I'm sure she will never need my assistance when standing up for her community, but always happy to give it if she's ever finding herself in need of it. And my honourable friend, the member for Swindon North, again highlighted the role that MPs can play, and it shows what a good choice they made in the last election in bringing him here as a representative for his community. And I thank him for his support for the Water Special Measures Act and for looking at what we're doing in terms of regulating regulators more further. The honourable members for Twickenham and Richmond Park, we're talking about the Teddington abstraction scheme. Without sort of going into it in loads of detail here, there is going to be a consultation. They will be able to feed in residents and environmental concerns, but of course if either of the honourable members feel their concerns aren't being listened to or their residents' concerns aren't being listened to, yeah, happy if you wish to make arrangements and we can sit and have a longer conversation about that. And the honourable friend, the member for Bexley Heath and Crayford, just on, we mentioned about a family of 4 struggling with the water bills. So just again to highlight the water short eligibility, we are looking to expand the eligibility for it. But at the moment, if any family has 3 or more children under the age of 18 living at the property who claim child benefit, they will be eligible for water shore. So I sort of urge him to pass that on to his constituents. And of course, thank him for his support for the Water Special Measures Act and the Commission and our desire to introduce change. So before turning to Thames Water, I want to emphasise that as a government we recognise the water sector is facing many challenges and we set out an ambitious plans to tackle these challenges head-on. But it is important to emphasise that resolving these will require long-term and transformatory change. And I think one of the things that has been mentioned here, I think by the loyal opposition, is there is no silver bullet or quick fix to some of the problems that we face. We recently took the Water Special Measures Act through Parliament, amended in the other place, which will drive meaningful improvements in the performance and culture of the water industry and act as a first step in enabling wider and transformatory change across the water sector. The Act delivers on the Government's manifesto commitments by blocking bonuses for executives who pollute our waterways, bringing criminal charges against persistent lawbreakers, enabling automatic and severe fines for wrongdoing, and ensuring monitoring of every sewage outlet. And in October, we launched an independent commission into the water sector regulatory system in collaboration with the Welsh Government. And this is the largest review of the water industry since privatisation. The Commission will report in the middle of this year with recommendations on how to tackle systematic issues in the water sector to help restore our rivers, lakes and seas to good health, meet the challenges of the future and contribute to economic growth. These recommendations will form the basis of further legislation to attract long-term investment and clean up our waters for good. Now, I'll turn to Thames Water specifically and then move on to the sector as a whole. And I'll say as much as I am able to about Thames Water, bearing in mind it's going through a confidential process. Completely understand. I mean, I am not here as the honourable member of Thames Water. Can I just say that from the beginning? And I'm not here to defend the actions of Thames Water. What I want to sort of reassure, I hope, a message to the general public is that we are monitoring the situation. The company remains stable. In the event of special administration, the taps will still function. The sewage will still be taken, and I want that message to be heard by the general public, so there's no need for alarm. And for the people working within the company, that they will still continue to be paid in the event of special administration. And as a responsible government, we're preparing, of course, for every eventuality. However, at the moment, the company remains stable. I also just want to say that I think it's incorrect to say that we're resisting a special administration. I think that would be a total mischaracterisation of what special administration is and the process of entering a SAR. It's not that we are resisting anything, but a special administration order is a well-established mechanism to ensure the company continues to operate and customers continue to receive their water and wastewater services. So again, customers need not be concerned about any disruption to their water supply or wastewater services because of the financial position of their water company. The provision of water and wastewater services will continue. Special administration is the ultimate enforcement tool in the regulatory toolkit, and as such, the bar is set high. Now, the law is clear, and this obviously links to insolvency legislation, and states that special administration can only be initiated if the company becomes insolvent, can no longer fulfil its statutory duties, or seriously breaches an enforcement order. It is only in this scenario that the DEFRA Secretary of State or Ofwat crucially with the consent of the Secretary of State, have the power to request the court to place a company in a special administratory regime. The court then, if that situation arises, the court must be satisfied that there is sufficient evidence to demonstrate that the water company in question is either insolvent, can no longer seriously fulfil its primary statutory duties, or has seriously breached an enforcement order. It will then make a special administration order appointing a special administrator. So in the hypothetical situation, which isn't the situation I stress we are talking about now, but say somebody was to say, we want to put this company into a special administration, the decision then would be made by the court. And the court needs to be satisfied that there is the evidence there to put that company into special administration. Of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for her attention to this situation. But myself and my constituents will genuinely have to ask, how much more do they have to fail before we would decide that they are no longer fit to operate? The level of failure is so high that whilst I appreciate what she says in terms of following the letter of the law, people simply won't understand.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and completely. And what I really want to stress is, whereas that's the legal process for entering a special administration, that does not mean for 1 second that we're satisfied with the performance of the company as a whole. But there is a wealth of difference between a court-sanctioned process to enter special administration and government taking action. There are many things in which we want to take action, and in fact the whole purpose of the Commission and looking at the whole way companies are set up, how we got into this position in the first place. Interestingly, might interest the loyal opposition as well, interestingly 2014 was the year in some of the rules and regulations around Ofwat were relaxed. It might be part of the coalition government. But one of the things that we need to look at here, it's not like we're completely satisfied with everything and so we're not doing a SAR. What I'm saying is SAR is an ultimate enforcement tool. It's a serious step to take. It's sanctioned by the court, but that doesn't mean we're not doing anything else in between. And there's lots of other actions that we're taking, but that was just to address the specific point around, why are we not pushing a company into special administration? Always.
Thank you, Minister. Would the Minister agree, and I just want to kind of play back what the Minister just said, that so it is up to either Ofwat or the Secretary of State to apply to the court to put the company into special administration, and as the Minister wrote to me back in, I think, September or July last year, it is one of those conditions is whether the company is likely or is unable or likely to be unable to pay its debts. Now, given that the company has come out and said, we've only got £39 million and I've got £19.5 billion of debt, and we're going to run out of money by March 24th, I think we passed that benchmark pretty clearly. So the idea that we haven't got to that benchmark is simply, in my view, not true. So therefore, it is up to Ofwat or the Secretary of State, who continues to decline, maybe that would be a better word than resist, to ask the court to consider.
Minister.
With respect, I think we have different interpretations of the truth here, Madam Chair. What we're saying is the company can enter a SAR if it becomes insolvent. Thames Water is not at the point of insolvency. At the moment, the company remains stable, and as I say, my message to the public and to people working within the company is the company remains stable. However, as a responsible government, we're obviously preparing for every eventuality. Now, I want to talk about broader commitments to financial stability and the Independent Commission, because for me today, this discussion highlights more than anything how important it is to address the financial resilience of the water sector. We're here specifically talking about Thames Water, but that does not mean everything else is a bed of roses. Historical decisions made by companies on debt levels have left some companies badly financially exposed, and these decisions often coincided with moves towards more complex ownership structures and the involvement of firms with shorter-term horizons. So the government does have an important role to play, and we completely recognise that, in setting a regulatory framework that encourages a stable water sector. And in hindsight, many might actually question the changes in 2014 to make Ofwat a lighter touch regulator. The Independent Water Commission is exploring how the government could do this, how exactly we could have that regulatory structure that I think most people in the room recognises that we need. And the call for evidence is currently live, seeking views from stakeholders on improvements that could be made to economic regulation across a number of areas. And as always, welcome contributions from everybody across the House. The call for evidence does close on the 23rd of April. I encourage all interested parties to respond to the Commission's questions on these topics via DEFRA's online consultation tool, Citizen Space. I want to conclude by reiterating that both the Government and Ofwat are carefully monitoring the situation with Thames Water. Yes, of course. John Lamont.
I just want to pick up on some of the points I made during the debate in relation to Scotland. Some of our honourable friends have been advocating for nationalisation. I just wondered if the Minister has any thoughts on that, and has the current government looked at what's happening in Scotland? Scottish Water, by many standards, are performing even less well than Thames Water, but Scottish Water is state-owned. The Chief Executive is paid £290,000. So the model in Scotland is not something I would encourage her to look at, and I'm not saying that she is, but I'd be keen to have her reflections.
Minister. I thank the gentleman for his intervention. Of course, it's devolved, and I completely respect the autonomy of the Scottish Parliament to make decisions in that manner. I mean, we've been clear, the government's been clear that we're not looking for nationalisation simply because of the cost of it and the time it would take and the legal complications. My focus is quite simply on what I can do to improve the situation we're currently facing. I think there's a lot of consensus around looking at regulation and how effectively or not regulation is working at the moment and what can be changed, and that's where I've put all my focus. And in terms of the Water Commission, nationalisation was ruled out of the Water Commission. However, all other forms of ownership are allowed within the terms of reference. Again, so it's for the company to resolve their issues of financial resilience within the context of their licence and broader statutory obligations. However, I must be clear, the government is prepared for all scenarios across our regulated industries, as any responsible government would be. I want to reiterate that this new government is committed to turning around the water sector, and I refer back to my 10 reasons for hope before Easter, Madam Chair. This will be achieved through practical measures to clean up illegal sewage dumping and attract major private sector investment to upgrade infrastructure while prioritising the interests, as we mentioned, of customers and, of course, our beautiful environment. Thank you.
Luke Taylor to wind up.
Thank you very much. At a Sutton Council meeting before the 2024 election, I made it clear. They elected 2 Liberal Democrat MPs in Sutton. We will hold Thames Water to account for its mockery of our residents. And I'm proud to stand here today to start to deliver on that promise. I thank contributions from around the Chamber, the Honourable Member for Slough, who is not in his place, but his interventions about the worries about his constituents show how hard he's obviously working for them. I do thank the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. I think he invites me to make a suggestion about the administration in Scotland and how actually nationalising and giving a toy to the SNP might not be the best idea in any circumstances, and maybe a change of administration might be beneficial for all of us. I thank the Honourable Member for Clapham and Brixton Hill for the reports the regular leaks and disruption, and I share her anger at shareholders and financial chicanery used to extract money from our most important utility. Although I will refrain and maybe try and scrub from my mind the image of the cherry on the sewage cake. I thank the my honourable friend, the member for Richmond Park. Absolutely agree special administration is needed. The company is understaffed and utterly demoralised. I thank the honourable member for Swindon North. I agree, this company is failing on every level. It also highlights the range at which Thames Water covers all the way from my constituent in South West London to Swindon North. The destruction of the natural habitat under Thames Water is heartbreaking, and the story of his intervention on his constituents' basis shows how comprehensively they are failing. I thank my honourable member, my honourable friend, the member for Twickenham. She mentions how it undermines public trust while the residents see an increase in bills, and also note her comments about the Teddington Direct River abstraction site I'm also glad to learn that the Hamlands are in safe Liberal Democrat control once again. Also her frustration and worry about the failed infrastructure projects under Thames Water, and do worry about any investment and infrastructure plans just not doing what they are supposed to do. I thank the Honourable Member for Bexley Heath and Crayford. I share his frustration at the town centre, which is blocked and closed for months due to water leaks, and can only imagine the incredible disruption to his residents and the frustration that he shares on their behalf. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Witney. I agree that the support means, or further support would be breaching the Ofwat guidance and its own rules, that Thames Water is failing on all counts, and again, through his hard work on holding Thames Water to account and revealing the astonishing financial situation of Thames Water, it is truly terrifying. I am heartbroken that I am only the second person to get into Hansard Shambopoli as well, which hopefully becomes a new byword for the situation that Thames Water enjoys. I really do thank the contribution from my old friend and the Right Honourable Member for Keithlin Ilkley, and do acknowledge the efforts that the last government made to monitor sewage outflows. Obviously, understanding and quantifying the problem is the first step at resolving him. And again, note the discrepancy with the administration north of the border. And also his welcome words on the Teddington extraction project, which I then welcome from the Minister, and I thank you for coming to this place and taking part in this discussion this afternoon. I admire your ability to get 10 things that were achieved regarding, I suppose, the water industry and by the Labour government, but I think it will be a common refrain from at least this part of the House: we need to do more and we need to do it faster. Again, good to hear about the consultation on the Teddington project, which will reassure many of my colleagues. And I welcome the reassurance for residents that whatever happens, their water will still flow and the sewage will still continue to flow. I do question how none of the measures that have been implemented fundamentally change the status quo with Thames Water, and does not put a permanent fix in place. I do recognise that the government's position, the Minister's position, is limited in what they can do. However, special administration, and we do understand that special administration is surely the last throw of the dice to save Thames Water, and I would question, and again repeat the query from around the chamber: if not now, when? Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered government support for Thames Water. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.